Death penalty exists in 34 states of the United States of America. Currently, only 16 states actually perform executions. Executions are carried out by lethal injection. Utah is the only state that until recently allowed the option of a firing squad. As a German, coming from a different historical background and being a guest in the United States, I respectfully disagree with the practice of capital punishment. Florida currently has nearly 400 inmates on death row. The main population is held at the state prison in Rayford. James Barnes is one of them. In order to film a death row inmate, you have to be invited by him in writing. Then, the warden of the prison has to give his approval, and the rules are you only get 1 hour on camera.
I'd love to have you do, James, is sign this.
Okay.
Are you able to do that?
Well, I can put a mark there for you, so.
In 1998, James Barnes was given a life sentence for the murder of his wife. However, 7 years into this sentence, he confessed to a previous murder, which landed him on death row. Even though I knew that Barnes still had an ongoing appeal, I was determined to be straightforward with him. Mr. Barnes, you should know that sympathizing with your quest to have procedural injustices corrected in your case, it does not necessarily mean that I have to like you.
Correct.
However, I really am intrigued by the question about we, not being on death row, have no idea how we are going to die and when we are going to die, but you eventually will know.
Yes.
That is a very specific situation.
It is. It's hard for an individual, and I'm given to great reflection, it's hard for an individual to concentrate on the end result of their life. It's like, if you were very spiritual, it would be like, oh, you have, a time to repent with a definite end date. And, that's one way, if just going spiritually, but mentally and psychologically, it comes with a lot of anxiety. It comes with the thoughts of, the people around you and yourself and how it's going to end. Because sometimes it doesn't work as well as they plan it. There was an inmate that was executed here named Diaz a couple of years ago. And their lethal injection protocol was atrocious. They went through his veins into his muscle and burned him up. And the published reports, and there has been film because they used to film the execution for possible appeals as cruel and unusual punishment, was what's happening, it burns, it burns. So there's kind of, humor is about things we're afraid of. And I had heard some humor on the yard about that. Press the red button when it burns to let them know that it's not working right. But, there is a lot of anxiety about concentrating on the end. It doesn't seem like anybody has discretionary authority to make things either better or more humane. This is a protocol. This is, the death protocol, and we're going to follow this to the letter of the law. Whether the procedure is working correctly or not, once they start it, it has to be finished. That's just the way it is.
And for you personally, how does the world outside appear? Do you see the sky? Do you see trees? Do you see a bird nesting somewhere?
I'm all the way in the back in a cell where I can see, we have two barriers, two walkways, hallways as you would, with bars separating them. Yes. About 10 feet away is a window, but I can't see anything but the building across from me. But if I look down at the end, I can see through a window that's about 15 feet away, and I can see some green grass. I can't see some trees that are 700, 800 yards away. It's something. And of course, every once in a while, a bird will nest for a few days in one of the windowsills. But
You have observed that.
I have observed that.
And how big an event is that?
For me, I appreciate it. But I've had cellmates where if a bird chirps, they just go ballistic. They can't stand it. It's making noise. It's just, there's different personalities.
Yeah, and for you?
For me, I love the rain. I love when I can hear it beat on the roof.
When was the last time you experienced rain on you?
I would have to say that it was in 2002.
So 8 years ago,
Yes.
you had rain on you.
Yes. I was in an open population. You know, in December, I've been locked up for 13 years.
Yes.
But I haven't spent that whole time on death row.
Yeah. Well, it was for a previous conviction.
Correct.
On murder charges.
Correct.
Yeah. In 1997, Barnes was living in Melbourne on the east coast of Florida. He already had accumulated a considerable rap sheet and was trying to get back together with his estranged wife, Linda.
What happened in the crime was he and she, I don't know if they were making amends, but he was staying there somewhat. She found some drugs. They got into an argument over it. He ended up grabbing her in what he calls a sleeper hold, and basically
What is a sleeper hold?
where he took her neck and put it in the crook of his arm and started to choke her. And actually what ends up happening is he chokes her to death. He strangles her to death. And after he's dead, or after she's dead, he has to get rid of the body or make an attempt to get rid of the body, and wasn't sure what he was going to do, and so he put her in the closet, in one of the closets in the house, so that if anyone came, they might not see her, and left her there for a period of time trying to figure out what he could do to dispose of her.
When law enforcement comes at you and you're cornered, this has happened to me several different times.
And describe how cornered, in which way?
All right. I'm going to give you the worst incident that happened.
Yes.
I was at my father's house. I was going to be arrested. I didn't know what the charge was at the time, but I thought it was for this murder that I'm here on death row for. And this was in 1988. There was a knock on the door. Well, actually, it started with a squirrel in the backyard looked at me, because I used to feed it peanuts in the morning, and it looked at me, it looked to the side, and it bolted up a tree. And I had the sliding glass door open, and I looked outside, and I saw a police officer with a shotgun, and he ducked behind a palmetto bush. I shut the door and stepped back like, did I just see that? I thought it was an illusion at first, so I opened the door and looked again, and I didn't see him. Well, I looked at the roof across, and there was a cop with a rifle pointed at me. And that was terrifying, all right? And then I looked through the kitchen out the jalousie windows, and there was another cop with a pistol at the side of the house. So I locked the doors, and I went to the front, and there was a knock. And there was a guy I went to school with who was a warrants officer with a big old .44 Magnum at his side. And I said, oh my God. When I finally did come out of the house, I had over 20 weapons pointed at me. That was severe panic. If I would have sneezed, I would have been shot to pieces. It was...
You were in panic when the body of your wife was hidden in the closet. What
Correct.
happened there? It's another incident.
This is another incident.
Yeah.
I was home. The police, well, actually her mother and her sister-in-law and her brother knocked on the door, and I opened the door for them, and they wanted to know where my wife was. And I said that she was at an attorney's. She was going to divorce me. Within an hour, there was police surrounding the house. They wanted to come in. They wanted to search. There was no way out. It was severe panic.
Where was your wife?
She was in the closet in the back bedroom.
Dead.
Yes. Yes, she was dead.
And what were his comments?
You know, he tried to play it off in the interview that it was all an accident, that he had gotten mad at her he had put this chokehold on her to calm her down because she was getting out of control, and that in so doing they fell to the floor. And when they fell to the floor, he said he either must have broken her neck or in some form choked her. Now, as we go through this interview and keep going on, he tells us and describes it quite vividly how he picked her up off the ground and to the point where she's shaking, and he notices that she urinates on herself, which is a little bit different than we fell to the ground and this was an accident. So as the interview goes on, of course, he gets much more descriptive in it and details you a very violent act, and very vivid violent act in his memory of noting that she's shaking, noting that she urinates on herself. So something that he was cognizant of what's going on at that point in time, and it's obvious in my mind, and of course it was to the legal system, that this was a premeditated act at that point. He was there to kill her.
And he made a very nasty, strange remark. You mentioned something.
He asked, and I think you're talking about, he asked to have her ex-husband in that part of the interview, and that he would confess to the act and tell us the exact truth if the ex-husband was in the room, so that the ex-husband could relay her last minutes to her children, which to me is it's another violation. And for me, he's doing that because that's the ultimate power trip for him. He ends up going out with the power over the ex-husband and the power over those children, by knowing that that's the last thing that they're going to now remember about their mother and his wife. That's the last thing that they're going to remember is what he told of her last minutes. And that's, to me, that's a violation to victims all over again.
And when he tried to manipulate the course of the interrogation before it really started, was it like a chess game?
It very much was. We were playing a big game. It really was. I called at one point probably 4 hours into the interview, 4 or 5 hours, and I think this interview totally is about 9 hours from the time I meet him down in our holding cells till we get finished. And at some point in there, I want to say about 5 hours in, I actually called my supervisor and said, you need to get somebody else here because I'm getting very tired. Because mentally, it was a big challenge of being able to do everything right so that this case could be prosecuted, because he was very, very smart in what he was saying. I mean, even to bring up, to ask me, what would an attorney tell me to do? And of course, my answer back was, what do you think they'd tell you to do, James? And then his answer back was, well, they'd tell me not to talk, don't you think? And I said, yeah, that's probably what they do, but it's up to you what you do. Do you want an attorney? And then we would move off of that subject. He wanted me to make a mistake in answering that question once again to set up a suppression issue for him to have it thrown out.
Somehow to trap you on his Miranda rights.
Yes, sure.
So it would be on tape, sure. And you would somehow persuade him not to have an attorney present or something like this.
At one point in there he said, I will talk to you and tell you everything if we're not on tape, but you can take all the notes you want, knowing that we tape everything. So putting me into a position that there would be nothing memorialized, my word against his. I think I'll win that battle, but it muddies the water, and I was trying not to do anything. I knew the type of case we had, and he did too. He knew he had a problem. He has a dead woman in his closet, and he's the only person in there, who did that. I mean, he knows he has a real problem with this case. So his best bet is to try to find something technically that I do wrong in order to get it thrown out. And that's what he was doing. But very, very intelligent man. There's no question about that. Very well schooled in the legal system and in the criminal justice system, and trying to use it for his own good at that point.
I'm very impressed with your abilities to defend yourself in court. For example, in the appeal papers that I have seen, you act as your own attorney.
Yes, I did. Under the Sixth Amendment of the Constitution of the United States, I have a right to representation.
Yes.
The other side of that coin is I have a right to represent myself.
Yeah, you invoked the so-called Ferretta right.
Right, the Ferretta.
Which means you would not be allowed to defend yourself if you were planning to commit state-ordered suicide. So the clock is ticking.
Right now, it started October 4th. I have 1 year to have my next appeal complete.
James Barnes is awaiting execution for a different crime, one that took place right next to this marina in Melbourne. In prison for his wife's killing, Barnes converted to Islam and during the holy month of Ramadan decided to seek atonement. He confessed to a previous murder. Patricia Miller, a nurse, lived alone in this apartment complex. Leaving all his clothes outside in a bag, Barnes, stark naked, entered and watched her for hours from a closet as she did household chores and watched TV. The murder became known as the burning bed.
He actually made a determination that he wanted to sexually assault and kill her. He actually took off all his clothes, went into her apartment, watched her for a period of time, and then assaulted her, bound her, tried to strangle her. I don't believe she died at that point, so he picked up a hammer, beat her with the hammer, actually killing her, and then in an attempt to destroy as much evidence as he could, he set the bed that she was on fire.
You know, there's a couple different types of murder. One's an opportunity murder. That's like a robbery or something like that, and it's kind of messy. No, it's very messy. An opportunity murder is very messy. There's a vengeance murder where somebody's humiliated you, and you've planned, even if it was a quick. And
it's very fascinating for me because you refuse to speak about it. Apparently, you had one or two, several encounters with your victim, with Patricia Miller, whom you killed. You never talked about it and refused to talk about it, but apparently you were humiliated or repudiated by her. I do not know.
Well, there were several events that had happened, and as somebody who I really don't want to, I don't know, saying something disparaging or pointing my finger at my victim, I don't think would help me at all, and I don't think it would help anybody at all. But there was a couple of incidents between us, and I felt terribly humiliated. That's about all I can say. I was humiliated.
Yeah. And there was premeditation then to kill her,
Yes.
enter her apartment, kill her,
Yes.
sexually assault her.
Yes, all those things. It was very ugly. It was very brutal. It was very messy, and there's no way to take it back.
Mr. Burden, you are the legal counsel for James Barnes, who is on death row. How far are his appeals exhausted?
Well, he had his direct appeal with the Florida Supreme Court, and writ of certiorari has been filed with the United States Supreme Court, and I believe that's pending. If that has been decided, he's now in what we call the post-conviction phase, and that is a time frame of a couple years that the capital collateral representative will have to present any post-conviction issues.
But I'm under the impression that one possibility, James Barnes is trying to accelerate the procedure. Could it be that there's a death wish behind all this, that he tries to waive certain rights and just speed things up?
Any attorney involved in a case like this is very suspicious of the motives of someone like Mr. Barnes as to why he's not affording all his procedural rights. And many times, because what we see in other cases, you suspect they may be death volunteers.
James Barnes' case, in particular the murder of Patricia Miller, looks to me like a monstrous crime. There's something really monstrous, scary, definitively evil about it. However, he does not appear to be a monster, in my opinion. I always try to see him and treat him as a human being. In your case, is your opinion somehow split between the facts of the case and the human being here in front of you who needs your defense?
I'll tell you that we all have feelings and we all have concerns. And due process of law and the fact that we have this in this country is more important than my personal feelings about any of it. I was an intelligence officer in El Salvador during the 80s when there was no due process.
Yes.
And I was in Panama during the Noriega administration where there wasn't due process. And you see how the lack of due process wears on a citizenry. It's horrible. They don't discuss things frankly with you. They be careful who they associate with and who they talk to. It's a different kind of society that I would never want to choose to live in. So I have very, very strong feelings that due process is far more important than the vagaries of an individual case. I could equally prosecute Mr. Barnes as defendant with equal vigor. The process is what's more important. And sometimes I think in the hysteria of the actual events, people forget the bigger picture. What really is at stake here is that someone has their day in court before their rights or their life are taken from them. I wish Americans would travel more and see and go to a culture where the whims of an individual can totally control your fate. Yes. And they will defend Mr. Barnes easily after they go through that experience.
You made some cryptic remark that there might be still something else out there. Do I misread it? Or?
No, there was much innuendo is what I would say, the cryptic innuendo. There are other, there are other crimes out there that I've committed that I've never been held accountable for. Would I ever come forward again and admit to these things? I think I picked the wrong agenda, the wrong platform last time. I don't believe...
But would you eventually speak if you are strapped to the gurney or shortly before when you have a last chance to bring closure to families of victims or whatever? Would that be on your agenda?
That's absolutely part of something that I have thought greatly about. The state of Florida is a state that they don't care about the consequences of an individual's actions or...
Yeah, but let's forget about the state. I mean, you are in a very grim situation and at the end of possibilities almost.
Right.
There is you as a human being, not dealing with a state, but dealing with personal guilt. Do I see that correctly?
You do see that correctly. There is no proper way to come forward and say how sorry one is or show remorse. They say I'm remorseless. I'm not. I have cried so many nights, so many days. I've spent so much time trying to figure out how to balance the scale. I just didn't see. I just didn't really understand the gravity of what this state would do to me, for coming forward and saying I'm sorry,
right, yeah.
And not offering anything other than, I'm responsible. This is what I've done. This is exactly how it happened. There is no more questions in this case, and now I'm going to be executed.
When he's in pain, it's like I can feel his pain. I mean, we've been estranged for a long time now, but back in the day when we were close or being raised together, I could feel his pain. I could feel his hurt. The hurt was so bad that I would be crying too. Like if he was sent to a detention center or the juvenile detention center, I'm the one that would be crying at home. I'm the one that hurt because it was like we were ripped in half. It was like part of me was always gone. I would not celebrate our birthdays when he was not there, and I would not celebrate our Christmases. This is my siblings. This is my older sister Beth, my twin brother James, me, my little brother Michael, and my little sister Roberta. I'm not bitter anymore. I'm accepting. I hurt for James that he didn't make it. I hurt for my little brother Michael, who committed suicide. And I survived. I could have been a statistic out there on drugs and alcohol, and I could be dead from the lifestyle.
Is there a possibility that you will see him? Or do you have to settle with yourself first?
I would like to see him, but I might not be allowed to.
But I think family members should have a possibility to see him.
Well, I understand, but I think I might have a warrant down there for a misdemeanor. Yeah, I mean, as long as I'm in Georgia, I'm fine.
You were in trouble as well.
I got in trouble, yes, when they got divorced. I think I was about 16 years old. I did end up dropping out of school and doing my own thing, beach bum kind of lifestyle, working in nightclubs, entering bikini contests, just drugs and the alcohol and all the nightlife that came with it is what I did.
So you were a bad girl.
I was very bad, yes. Yes, I'm a 2-time convicted felon for drugs, and I've probably had over 35 to 40 misdemeanor arrests for drug-related incidences.
And if you show up in prison, they may decide to keep you for a
Yeah,
while.
yeah.
I've had some horrible dreams here. I mean, absolutely, and especially when I first got here.
Describe it.
Wow. I remember my home in Maryland, and the grass was very green there, and for some reason, my twin sister and I were buried up to our heads, and my father was mowing the grass, and he was pushing a lawnmower towards us, and he ran over my twin sister's head. And I've had that recurring dream about 5 times, and it just messes me up inside because my feeling is, don't do this to me, but I feel so terrified and repulsed by what just happened.
The nightmares were so bad that I was mentally and physically exhausted during the day. And I could not understand why I had to have such horrific nightmares. Why couldn't I be normal like everybody else and have a normal dream? I have woken my husband up saying, you need to call 911 because somebody else was getting hurt and I was watching the other person getting hurt. And, you know, I woke him up telling him to call 911. It wasn't me getting hurt anymore. It was somebody else. I've had, you know, a couple real good dreams. The one where God appeared to me.
Oh, please describe. That's what I want to know.
Well, okay, the scenario was something bad was happening and I was running from room to room to get away from this bad thing coming to get me. And all of a sudden I seen this light in this doorway and I was scared to go. I was scared to go behind any door because this person was going to get me. But I ran and all of a sudden there was this big giant image of Jesus letting me know that nobody was going to hurt me now. And I'm like, the dream's over and I'm sitting there looking at God, you know, and I wasn't even sure it was God, but I know it was. You can just tell. And Pastor Jan, I guess I invited her in my dream because I wanted to know, is this Jesus? And she said, yeah, and ran out my dream. But it went from a real horrific scenario to just seeing God and him saving me. It was just so big and such a glow, and he's so perfect. And yeah, it was just really, it was a good dream.
So I was one of those that wasn't wired like everybody else. I needed constant supervision. I needed my parents there. And then you have to keep your family unit whole, no matter what, because people are going to make mistakes. And if you can keep those mistakes private, it's best. That's what will keep the family unit strong. But if you have to go outside of your family with mistakes that others have made, you have to support them. You may not agree or like what the individual has done, but you have to love them and tell them that you support them.
This might have been a juvenile detention center at 17.
But he went to jail fairly soon after that.
Yeah, he was always in and out of jail for all kind of stuff.
Like,
Theft, arson, I don't really remember all.
drugs.
Drugs. So I remember our next door neighbor's house, next door to this house. James did admit to doing that. I think he admitted it. He went in and burglarized them, and then he lit their bedroom on fire to get rid of the evidence or something like that. And then there was another fire out there where my father lived in a townhome that he had burglarized, and then he set it on fire too. And then one time I think he had a BB gun, and when it rained, the frogs would all come into our pool, and he went around with this BB gun and shot them all. And he thought it was neat because the pellet come out through the stomach, and you could turn it over and you could see the pellets, but he just kept killing them, and it just really broke my heart because, you know, we had a scooper to scoop them out, but he thought it was okay to just shoot them all. Look how neat it is. And
Generally what they say when you look at the profiles that behavioral scientists come up with, a lot of people that have done serial crimes, and particularly serial murder, have arson in their background, have animal abuse in their background. I mean, as you start to go through these things, those are some of the things that they see on some of the people that have been studied as serial killers. So, I mean, would it surprise us that there might be more crimes out there? No, because he has a lot of the signs. But as I said, the only two that I know
we
for
have
sure.
some vague indications, but not verified, that he strangled the family cat, or cats.
Right, which would fit in.
And always in trouble for arson.
so yeah, there seemed to be a lot of fires. That's about all I can remember on the fires for now. Except for, I was told about the last fire when he set the lady on fire.
You do have a few absurd privileges, like a last meal.
That's not what's going to be on my mind. That's not important to me. I have thought about it, and I do have favorite foods, you know.
Like?
Well, anything that comes off, any meat, beef that comes from a grill cooked on fire, I do. I'm fixated, you know, on fire ever since I was a kid, but I love the smell and the ritual of cooking, you know, beef on a grill.
It has nothing to do with you being an arsonist.
I don't think so.
Well.
No, because any good chef is has a lot of flame in the kitchen anyway, whether they're outside or not.
Right.
But
This is the home where most of the trouble started in. As you can see, this is us looking like the Cleaver family, but it really wasn't. What happened inside those doors was very horrific. I still have flashbacks. My father would make us all go into this living room, as you can see in this window here, and he would close the blinds, and this is when James would do something bad, or Mom said he did, or Beth said he did. My father would have what they call a blanket party, as something he learned from the military. And I believe he actually used one of those blankets from the military, the old gray ones, and he would put it over my brother's head, which this is my twin brother right here, and take a belt and make us all stand there and whip him. And if we didn't whip him, we were going to get whipped. So he didn't know when he was going to get hit, but by the time my dad got him out of the blanket, his face would be beet red, with just tears streaming down and welts all over him. I just remember me screaming and crying throughout the whole thing. James started to withdraw and become angry. Didn't want to go to school because he didn't like going to PE because you had to dress out, and he always had welts on him or whipping marks. The other kids would laugh at him. He wouldn't be allowed to go at any of the family functions like that. He had to stay in his room beaten like a dog.
With welts and
With
bruises.
welts, bruises, bleeding, beat anywhere on his body. I've seen him get punched in the chest like a man.
Was there sexual abuse?
Well, I was told there was sexual abuse. I don't have any memory of it. I do have the frozen fear, and I do remember being in my bed and someone coming into my room. I don't know who it was. I don't know what they did to me. I was only told by my older sibling and my mother that I was sexually abused. But I can't say that who did it. I don't know. I have no memory at all. But they did say that's why James was taken out of the home.
With his execution looming, 4 months after our first visit, we were allowed to see James Barnes again. He had had no contact with his family for over a decade. You do know that we found your sister?
Yes.
There's one surprise that I would like to bring to you. Last night, we located your father.
Oh, you did?
We identified ourselves. He immediately declined to be filmed. And now I asked him specifically, is there anything that I could pass on to your son, to you? And he pondered, and then he said, yes, please pass one thing on to my son. 1, I love him. 2, I hate the crimes he committed. So, and he was silent then and looked at me, and I said, Mr. Barnes, I will not fail to pass this on.
That's, it's been a long time.
Yes.
Thank you so much. I don't know what to tell you. I've been wanting to be in touch with him for so long, and to find out that you met him just last night, it's wonderful. Wow. You know, years ago, I had taken a self-inventory, and I wrote lists about what things I've done in my life that I'm most ashamed of, what things in my life I'm most proud of, and then what in my life would cause me the greatest grief and what in my life would cause me the greatest joy. And I found that the thing that would have affected me the most, because I knew I was never getting out, was if my father were to die while I was still alive, I would have been devastated. Well, I thought that that was the worst possible thing that could have happened to me, and I was wrong. The worst possible thing ended up being I knew he was still alive and he didn't want anything else to do with me. That put me down hard for many years, and now I feel so much better. I understand that he sees the ugliness of the things that I've done, and I understand anybody seeing that. You know, you could sit here and you could cry about what you've done. You could tell people how sorry you are about what you've done in your past. But the fact of the matter is that taking 100% responsibility for your actions is the most important thing in any, it doesn't matter whether you're the defendant or the victim in any type of incident. The person who's wrong needs to take 100% responsibility.
6 weeks after our first encounter, James Barnes sent us a letter in which he hinted at the possibility of telling us about 2 more unsolved cases. I was suspicious of Barnes using me as an instrument either to procrastinate or speed up his execution by opening new cases against him. Could I address our last contact through letters and our last conversation where I was under the impression you know more than I do?
Yes.
And that there are things out there that maybe the world should know.
I have a list. You know how people talk about a bucket list?
Yes.
Well, no, I
do have a list as well.
Okay, I have a list of things that I'm going to accomplish. And one of them is to resolve all the unresolved crimes that I've ever committed.
May I mention two names?
Right.
You mentioned Chester Wetmore,
Yes.
a young man, very young, a teenage.
Yes, he was teenage.
And Brenda Fletcher.
Right, and the only reason why I knew her name is because I had seen her ID. But she was going under a different name when I had met her.
We actually traveled north and we saw the water-filled ditch along the northbound on-ramp from State Road 520 to
Past the fish camp.
Exactly, to Interstate 95.
Correct, that's the place.
I looked at it, it turns, it goes in a right curve, in a soft right curve.
If you were coming from the east, it would be on north.
Northbound, yes,
Yeah.
exactly, By examining unsolved homicide records, we learned that in the water-filled ditch to the right, the decomposed body of Brenda Fletcher was found.
Brenda was a prostitute. She obviously didn't have any family or any roots. It's hard when you talk about crack cocaine addicts to give an age, but she was, I would say, 40. She stole my wallet. She didn't have to steal my wallet. I only had like 30-something bucks, all right? All I really wanted was my driver's license back, and I told her that. I said, all I want is my driver's license back. Oh, I didn't steal. I said, I know you. You're the only person. You're a crack addict. I know what you did. I just want my ID back. If I get pulled over without it, I'm going to jail. I had already had a suspended driver's license deal once before.
And you were involved in this crime?
Yes.
And you were involved in Chester Wetmore?
Yes.
Let me talk about Chester Wetmore.
Okay.
He was missing since 27th of May 1986.
I ran across him in 1988. He was skinny. I would say 5'9", 5'11", somewhere in between there. 17, 18, 19. He was a runaway.
Yes.
I knew that he was on crystal meth, but he had graduated to crack cocaine, but it didn't matter which drug he used. I was very much made aware by him that his family had been looking for him and he needed a place to hide. He needed a place. He'd been on the streets for a long time. He'd been involved in prostituting himself. I mean, he was a street person. I supplemented my income by selling drugs.
Yes.
And that's how I ran into him. And he ended up breaking into my car. And I was very, very upset because he took all my product. And I knew it was him. And I ended up killing him, and I ended up burying him. I actually had two accomplices, but I'm the one that shot him.
Okay.
We had invested a little over $2,200 into 2 ounces of cocaine, and I had a 20 gauge shotgun in the trunk of my car. I just went in the trunk and got the shotgun out. Now, Clary, he didn't want me to shoot this guy, no kind of way. Steven, he was like, you know, he was just a bystander who was with whatever, and when I shot him, you know, they both like, you know, it's like, it scared them very much. And then when I shot him again, you know, it was like Michael didn't want to be there, and Steve says, well, I'm taking your car. I said, yeah, I got to get rid of the body. Let's just say that there was a spot that had been prepared, not for specifically Chester. It was an easy spot to throw someone in and fill up. He was still shiny. I don't know how to explain this, but before you get to a certain age, especially at night, and that's where I saw him most of the time, older people, they don't have a shine, a gleam to their skin. He still had the young gleam. You could tell, I don't know how to explain this. He still had a glow.
You mean as an inner attitude, like you still have the world ahead of you, your whole life ahead of you?
No, what I mean is descriptively, ocularly, is he still had the sheen, the sweat sheen, the glow. And children have it. Adults like me and you, we don't have. Now, I may right now because I'm This is my second call out today. My ankles are killing me. They put the shackles on too tight the first time and they rubbed me raw. Oh my God. Plus I'm way down at the end and in the cell. It's humid today. Last time we were here, I was freezing. But no, descriptively, he was still very young. He had the glow.
Mr. Barnes, my impression is that the state of Florida is interested in one thing,
What's
and
that?
that is to kill you off.
Oh, yes.
So that's number one. And I have my doubts that the state decides to indict you on any other crime, spend months and months of investigations, indictment, legal procedures, have a trial against you again, spend millions of dollars and sentence you to death again. What's the point?
See, these are...
They just want to kill you. Fast.
Right.
There are a lot of different arguments in support of capital punishment, deterrence and so forth.
But
The
we
only
know
th-
it doesn't deter anyone.
I-
Yes,
and I agree with that.
Statistically, we know it.
I think the only support for it is retribution.
Yeah.
An eye for an eye, to speak.
Which is biblical and it's Old Testament,
Arguably
but it's
so.
not what Jesus would try to tell us.
So, well, I have to tell you that for the foreseeable future, capital punishment is here to stay. It's very popular in this state. If you took an opinion poll, the citizens of Florida support it. And so I don't see it changing anytime soon.
There is an overwhelming sense of shame, along with the fear, the panic, and the knowing that so many people want you dead. I mean, I'm already incapacitated. I'm in a cell. I'm chained, shackled. I mean, I've got 7 pounds worth of state jewelry on me. You're going to kill me now. Is that retribution? Is that vengeance? Is that punishment? Is that going to change anything in this world for the better? It's not. You have to have imagination in order to cope. That's how I cope. Mm-hmm. And I spend most of the time wishing for things I don't have.
Give me some details.
All right. I wish I was free.
Sure.
All right. I wish I had no constraints. I wish it was a hot day on the beach and I could jump in the ocean. That's like the thing that I really want to do is submerge myself and then come out and rinse off with fresh water. I don't know, it's like a rebirth or a renewal. It's like I've been through so much and I've gotten so dirty and I can't wash it off. And the only thing that I can do is dream about how I would wash all the filth.